Hello and welcome to episode 12 of The Best Games Period. I'm Jack Gardner, and with me, as always, are Daniel Jones and Jeremy Brown, and today we're going to be looking at GoldenEye 007 for the N64.
What is a GoldenEye?
Apparently, the guy who wrote all the James Bond novels, he participated in a covert operation during World War II that was codenamed GoldenEye. And he, I guess, liked that name so much that he named one of his books and later one of his estates after it.
Wait, one guy wrote all the James Bond novels?
Yeah.
Even the current ones?
Well, I don't think there have been any recent ones.
He's very dead.
Okay.
Ian Fleming is very dead.
I just wanted to make sure on that, because, okay, that makes sense.
Well, Casino Royale was the first one, yeah?
What?
Yes.
Casino Royale was the first James Bond novel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And then it would go on to become the best James Bond movie. But anyway, we're not talking about James Bond as a whole. We're talking specifically about a James Bond video game.
Right. And this one came out in 97. So pretty... It's odd in the realm of licensed games because it came out much, I think almost 2 years after the actual GoldenEye movie came out.
Would you say it's pretty rare in the realm of licensed games?
It's kind of an odd job.
Oh, gosh. I come back to the podcast after a week, and this is what's waiting for me, huh?
Welcome back, Jack.
This is what happens after you have a royal tooth pain.
Oh, gosh. Anyway, yeah, so there's a ton of weird stuff going on in GoldenEye 007. I guess I'm curious to know where you guys kind of are standing on it initially, because I was definitely leaning not so much into GoldenEye.
Okay.
Because I don't think I didn't think it had aged well.
Okay.
Gonna be honest with that.
Yeah.
So here's where I stand on it, and I'll be brief, I promise. I don't know anything about it, but I know that people love the game, and it's considered amongst many gamers as the kind of godfather, so to speak, of multiplayer competitive deathmatch. And
on consoles.
On consoles, yes, thank you.
Right.
Yep.
I haven't played the game. I've done very little research on the game, I'm going to be honest. But people love the game.
You can be the mediator, because I think I fall...
That's kind of why I wanted to go first and just say that, and then I'm going to shut up.
Oh.
Well, you don't have to completely shut up.
No, I'll make some bad jokes, don't get me wrong. That's what I do.
All right, good. That's what we need. This is a James Bond episode, after all. And if there's one thing that James Bond is good at, it's making bad jokes.
Also, shout out to the James Bonding podcast. If you guys haven't heard of that, you should check it out. It's pretty interesting.
And shout out to the wealthier PPK also. I mean, pretty badass weapon.
Is it a real gun?
Yes, it's a very real gun.
Have you shot it?
Yes. It's not...
Ooh.
I haven't shot James's gun personally, but it's a... it's a massively produced gun that anybody can buy.
Yeah, okay.
And,
Didn't know that.
And it's not one you would really buy as an assassin, or a spy, but, it works for him, so whatever.
Is there a real golden gun? Sure, it kills people in one shot?
Most guns are capable of that, yes.
Are capable of it, but most guns actually don't kill people in one shot.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a different discussion. I mean, you can buy any gun and make a golden if you want. Look at all the drug lords in Mexico.
Spray paint it.
Jeremy's kind of the resident gun expert here.
See, this is what we needed you for.
Some would call me Resident Evil.
Ooh. Yeah. Foreshadowing of things
we're not
to come.
there yet. Maybe at some point. So Jack, you were saying about GoldenEye, you think it hasn't aged well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a problem I think we'll run into a lot as we go through games that came out during like the N64, early PS1 era.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really innovative games that came out during that time, and a lot of that really set precedents for, generations of games to come. But they also haven't aged super well, and time has not been kind to how they look. Like, let's be real, most games that came out during that time look very not great by today's standards. Like, if you put this game in front of a child today, they would have a very hard time getting into it, just from a visual standpoint compared to all the stuff that's available now.
Come on, Jack. That face scan technology. Come on.
What are you talking about? What face scan technology?
I mean, it's incredible. Their faces look like flat versions of a real face.
What?
Are you trying to sell this? It's not really helping you.
No, not really. It's ugly as ass.
The Traveler's Tales Lego games look more realistic than this game.
Yeah, that is true.
That's true.
On that facial scanning note, I did learn, apparently they scanned a lot of people and things into GoldenEye. Like,
Yeah.
I think most people think of that technology as very recent. But almost the entire Rare staff had their faces scanned into GoldenEye and are used as generic enemy faces.
Also scientists.
And scientists, yep.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the animations in the game came from one guy on the development team that they would just have, they would have him close his eyes and then they'd just randomly push him over.
Yeah.
And and not to go on a tangent, but apparently that was a pretty dangerous thing to do because they joke about him bleeding on their motion capture set. And
Yep.
not to go off on a huge tangent, but that's probably one of the reasons voice actors today really want to kind of, get more on par with what other actors make. Because frequently voice actors these days are asked to do stunts that have a risk of injury to them. And they don't have the same protections as normal stunt people do. So, maybe an early case of when some safety protocols should have been,
considered at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a mocap Actors Guild.
Right, or something like that.
But, yeah, I mean, it was a very different time when, sorry,
It's okay.
when GoldenEye was being developed.
You sound very old, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, between your cough and it was a different time back then.
It really was, though.
We had to walk uphill both ways in the snow just to get to the market. Not to mention going to school, which is only for the privileged white kids.
Both go fuck yourselves. But really, the game development was so different, and they just kind of went around the office and scanned people's faces and pushed people around to get the animations, and they would just roll around on the floor to get the rolling animations, which are just the worst, by the way. And the worst thing, actually, is that you could shoot the dudes while they were rolling, but it really didn't register, and you didn't do any damage to them while they were rolling. You had to wait till they stopped and stood up and started shooting you before you could really do any damage to them. That was obnoxious.
Well, I mean, as our resident gun expert, Jeremy, is that true to life?
Yeah, you can get shot while you're rolling. Everybody knows that.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It kind of creates a protective shell.
No, the reality is, if you're rolling, you're more likely to get shot because most people don't have that good of aim, and they're just spraying and praying, so to speak. So your best bet is to get behind some sort of cover and shoot back.
Okay. Pro tactics from Jeremy Brown.
That's right.
Yeah, if you ever get into a gunfight and lose, don't hold me accountable. Call my lawyer.
So, GoldenEye... Okay. Here's the thing, Jack. I want to hear your personal history with GoldenEye.
Okay.
Because you are much younger than me. I am an old man. GoldenEye came out at the perfect time for me, but I want to hear your take on it.
Honestly, most of my experience with GoldenEye is from when I was, a young lad,
A young pup.
and I would go over to friends' houses and play it because that was just it. Kind of became the thing you did for like, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half. GoldenEye was just kind of the thing everyone did, and it was Halo before Halo was a thing.
For sure.
Everyone would sit down and take turns being the four people, playing it out and duking it out in deathmatch, playing with big head mode on or paintball mode on, or all the different little cheats that you could access in the game, which were super fun. Because I think it was probably also one of the first games that kind of did that, where it was like cheats were like blatantly built into the game. Like it wasn't something where you had to hear through you didn't have to hear through the grapevine about the Konami code. It was just already built into the game, and you just had to unlock them and then kind of go nuts with them. And it was super fun. There's just nothing else like it on console. I think there's probably there was probably stuff on PC at the time that was equivalent, but I wasn't a big PC gamer at the time, and so I wasn't really until I went to college anyway. So
who could afford a gaming PC in 1997?
Well, exactly. That's the other thing. So at the time, for most people, GoldenEye was the first-person shooter.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there were really great games coming out on PC at the time. Great shooters. And I was fortunate enough to have a PC that could play some of the better games. Doom. I had played Doom and Duke Nukem and Dark Forces, which we've talked about on this podcast before.
Yep. Side note, it's actually one of our most popular episodes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, people love Star Wars.
People also really love year-end shows, I guess.
That was the one I wasn't there for. People love shows without me.
Oh, you were there for the year-end show.
Oh. Wait, what? Dark Forces?
What?
I think you were talking about two different shows.
Oh. Okay.
Right? Because he wasn't on the Star Wars.
I'm just lying.
episode.
I know people love me, so go ahead.
All right. Whew. So anyway,
how could you not love me?
You're so lovable.
I'm very lovable. There were a lot of really good shooters at the time. Quake 2 was coming out soon after GoldenEye, I believe. So shooters were pretty great on PC, and there had never been one that really worked as well on consoles. Consoles just didn't have the power to do it. But then GoldenEye came out, and for me, it was such a different shooter. Suddenly, like, you weren't shooting monsters or aliens. You had objectives, and you had gadgets to use, and it had a story to follow, even if the story was kind of incoherent and very loosely based on the movie.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because of it being a game where you shot people, I seem to remember that there was like a little bit of a controversy about it being like too violent.
I don't remember that.
Because you had actual human enemies, you mean?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I think it actually, now that I say that out loud, I think it actually got banned in Germany.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Like, there's a list. Look this up. There's a list of 400 games that are banned in Germany, and I guess it's illegal to publish the list because then you would be somehow promoting the games. So it's very bizarre, but look it up if you can. It's also very interesting.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out at some point, but not in Australia.
I don't think in Australia. I think
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, it is to me.
Yeah. So GoldenEye, I played a lot. Like a lot. I got an N64 and didn't play much on it until I got GoldenEye, and holy crap, I played just a ton of that game. I played the campaign over and over. I loved the campaign. I played it on all the different difficulty levels, and that was one of the things that I loved about it, was that you could the different difficulty levels wasn't just the enemies were stronger and harder to take down and did more damage, but that you also now had more objectives that you had to complete, which meant you had to use every gadget available to you to complete these objectives. You had to search around the map for the different objective points of interest. And it made the missions so much more interesting. And then I played the multiplayer and just kept playing it with my friends. So I played it with my friends, but then my best memories of GoldenEye are playing it at a camp that I worked at. I worked at a summer camp.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. From when I was 15 to when I was 19. I worked there every summer, and we had a counselor cabin that was basically like the teacher's lodge, basically.
Okay.
And we would just, me and a few other people, and just random, everybody always would, like, every time there was a break, somebody was sitting at the TV playing GoldenEye on their break. And I would play on my breaks, and then I would play once the kids were asleep. I would go down and play with my friends till 1 o'clock, till we had to go back to the cabins. I played so much GoldenEye for it was probably 2 summers that N64 was there and we were playing GoldenEye. So I played a ton of it, but I do agree with you, Jack, that it hasn't aged well. But I don't know that means that it's not one of the best games, period.
Right. And that's kind of what I ran into while I was looking up stuff about GoldenEye and getting more of the background knowledge, is that, holy crap, this game is actually super important for a lot of the things that it did at the time that no one had really done before on either PC or console. Like, up until GoldenEye came out, you had pretty much the first person shooter that was the thing was Doom still.
Yeah. Yep.
And like GoldenEye pioneered like sniper rifles, because it was one of the first games that kind of was able to get rid of that distance fog.
Yeah.
To allow for sniper rifles. And like just something like that simple is like, maybe you could argue, well, someone would have done that eventually anyway, but they figured out how to do it on hardware that wasn't even out yet. Like, they were developing GoldenEye for the N64 before Nintendo had released the N64's specs.
Yeah.
And the N64 wasn't even out. That's crazy. Like, it literally makes me just kind of like stumble around for words, because I don't know how to. I don't think you can overstate how difficult that is.
At the time on consoles, there were just a bunch of arcade light gun shooters. Mm-hmm. There was Virtua Cop, and I don't No, not The Walking Dead. That zombie shooter, but that hadn't
House of the Dead.
come out. House of the Dead hadn't come out yet, but
Yeah.
But like there was a Die Hard game that I played the crap out of that too.
That Christmas game? That was a good game.
Yep.
Also, while I'm interrupting, I'll just say any rifle can be a sniper rifle. As the resident gun expert.
Oh, how's that? How does that work?
With a scope.
You just have to add a scope to a normal
Just
rifle.
add a scope.
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, what makes sniper rifles then? Like in video games, is that?
Well, most video games don't really go into detail, but like in the military, so to speak, most sniper rifles are a higher caliber, like not quite 50 caliber, not 223.
Okay.
But really, sniping is more about the user than the rifle itself.
Interesting. So it's not anything really about the gun.
There's no specific sniper rifle. I'm using air quotes here, so to speak.
Okay.
Right.
Like, most of them throughout most of the United States military history, at least from World War II through Vietnam, were 7.62 by 39, and more recently, the 50 caliber has become the go-to for the long distance sniper, but that's also a huge round, and it's a little less accurate, in the long run, so to speak, because it has to, it's just bigger. But sniping is really more about the user than the gun.
So, sniping is more dependent on you being a trained sniper than it is on what the tool.
I mean, your
have.
gun, like the gun itself makes a difference, but the caliber necessarily does not. Like,
Okay.
if you're, like a sniper rifle might have a different twist pattern. It might have a 7-to-1 ratio, whereas most rifles have a 9-to-1 ratio, which is the spiral in the barrel, right?
Okay.
It makes it more accurate at longer distances, but the caliber itself isn't that much of a big deal.
Okay.
We're
learning
I'm
things.
sorry, I had nothing else to contribute to this conversation. So that's what I. That's
It's
what I got.
okay. So, but what if there's just a really dense fog?
Then a trained sniper will not take that shot.
So
Right.
what you're saying is Doom Guy might have been a trained sniper, but we never got to find out because distance
Same with
fog.
Turok.
Okay.
Like Chris Kyle.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure you
Yes.
all heard him. American sniper, the guy that got killed at the gun range by the deranged guy he was trying to help.
Yep.
The same weapon he used as a sniper rifle used the same rounds as an AK-47.
Oh, wow. All right.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Good to know.
It is good
And there's
to know.
not a lot of fog in. See, we always say that.
This
best
is why we
games
talk
period-
about games I know more about. I'm sorry.
We always say that best games period is educational, and there's your proof.
Yeah.
So back to GoldenEye. Where were we?
We were talking about things that GoldenEye pioneered and innovated.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe we need to take a step back and look at kind of its development process,
Sure.
because this game started out as a game that was intended for the Super Nintendo as a side scroller,
Yeah.
and no one wanted anything to do with it. Rare didn't want anything to do with it because they wanted to make their own stuff.
Was it not supposed to be a game on rails? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's actually kind of the next step.
Right.
Like when they were like, well, let's not do it for the Super Nintendo. Let's do it for the unannounced Nintendo system that we don't know anything about yet.
Yeah.
But we'll be able to do it in 3D. And that means we can do kind of this, we can hop on this popular light gun fad. And specifically, they wanted to model it off of Virtua Cop,
Yeah.
which you brought up, Daniel.
Yep.
And I guess some of the first levels that they designed were actually and that made it into the final game were originally designed as light gun on rail segments, and that later when they shifted kind of their development focus and like what the game was going to be about, they had to go in and fill in the sections that you couldn't see from the rail segments. So originally those levels were just like basically just hiding voids into nothing.
Have you guys played any on rails games?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really dig arcade shooters. Like when I go into arcades, which isn't super awesome because it is super awesome, but isn't super often. There we go. I gravitate towards those light gun games. I think there's just something really fun about them.
I guess I kind of forgot about those games when I was asking that question. I thought about the Dead Space on rails games on rails game.
Oh, what do you? Oh, wait, what?
What? You don't know about that game?
What game are you talking about?
Daniel, help me out here.
Wait, the Dead Space one?
Yeah, no, there was a
Extraction.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I don't remember this game at all.
And
it was for Wii.
It was really cool. It came out on PS3 because that's how I played it.
But it originally was made for the Wii.
It was really cool at first, then it got really old.
No, I never played Extraction, but I played, like I said, I played a lot of the Die Hard game. I played a lot of Virtua Cop, and like you, Jack, this is kind of sad, but I'm going to tell you guys something about my childhood.
Okay.
So my mom, she would be very upset if she knew that I was saying this on a podcast. She used to go to the casinos.
Mm-hmm. My mom still does.
Once a month or so. So the Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods opened in the mid-90s here. And I would go with her in the summer, typically, or sometimes on the weekends throughout the year. And she would go and play the slots for like an hour and then give me $20 and I would spend it in the arcade.
Okay.
And just stay in the arcade for an hour and spend $20 there. I got pretty good at skee ball, but also I played a lot of light gun shooters. And so that was kind of like that, and Doom were my basis for what shooters were. And then I did really enjoy Turok Dinosaur Hunter. It's not one of the best games, period, but I enjoyed it. And then GoldenEye came out. GoldenEye came out after Turok. And I remember at first being kind of like, psh, GoldenEye sucks compared to Turok, because you didn't have full range of movement of your head in the same way that Turok did. Like, Turok kind of pioneered dual analog aiming, even though there wasn't two joysticks. You used the C buttons to move, and then you used the joystick to look around, which was unusual at the time, let me just say.
So like Twilight Princess? No, I'm being sincere.
Well, yeah.
No, like you used the C buttons, well, sort of, kind of. You used the C buttons on the N64 controller, up, down, left, and right, to move forward and to strafe left and right. And then you looked around by using your left thumb on the joystick to look around. So it was the opposite of like how we do it now. Like now we use our right thumbs on the joystick to look around and left thumbs to move. But at the time I had no basis. Maybe it's part of why I play inverted. Who knows?
Well, nobody had left thumbs before.
You play inverted?
Nobody. You know this.
I forgot, and you reminded me. You barbarian.
Nobody had left thumbs before 2001. That's why evolution is important. We all know this.
But then when GoldenEye came out, it had you move with the joystick on your left thumb, and then you looked around with the C buttons. With your right thumb, which was different from GoldenEye, and actually would become kind of the standard. The C buttons would get replaced with a right joystick, and Sony came out with the the DualShock and Medal of Honor started using the dual analog controls, which were fantastic. But at the time, there was no other way to do it but either the Turok way or the GoldenEye way. And for whatever reason, GoldenEye really worked. And I think what helped make that control scheme work for GoldenEye was that it had a very generous auto aim. I don't know if you remember that, Jack.
No, it does.
That game has an incredibly generous auto aim. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have been playable.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no, it wouldn't have been playable.
Right. So I haven't gone back and played it in a long time. Mm-hmm. I have gone back and played Perfect Dark in the last maybe 5 years, and I still feel like that holds up. But when I think back on the single player of GoldenEye versus Perfect Dark, GoldenEye's single player campaign is actually really tight and really fun, and it's really it's weird to say this, but it presents the movie's story really well in the constraints that it has to. Maybe you disagree.
I think that it does. I think you're right. That being said, I have more of an appreciation for it, knowing more about those constraints they were operating under, because it wasn't just like time constraints. It was actually the hardware itself, because they were kind of speculating as to the specs of the N64. The processor that Nintendo put out was only capable of 3/4 of information processing as they had claimed. So they ended up having to like cut down on a whole bunch of stuff. Like, there's some portions of the game that are in black and white, and that's to reduce the processing load. Actually, not strictly an artistic decision, but a decision to get around their constraint. A lot of the some of the walls are actually floors, so that enemies can see you. For some reason, that played a big role. How do I put this? Like the shuttle launch was basically all cobbled together out of different parts of different textures and assets that they had already made. The radar that they have in the game is actually an oil drum texture. Like, they were operating under a lot of different limitations that weren't just from their development schedule, which was actually, by today's standards, super generous. Like, today you would not be able to get away with a development cycle that goes 2 years after a movie came out.
Right.
But they were allowed to do that, and as almost an afterthought, they added the multiplayer, which is probably what made the game so colossal.
That's why I know of the game. Honestly, right. I've heard so many great things about the multiplayer. Daniel, other than tonight, I've never heard a single person other than you say anything about the campaign.
I really like the campaign. One more thing about it, though.
Okay.
They did a great job with the sound constraints that they had too. I mean, one of the problems with the N64 was that it used cartridges, and cartridges compared to CDs could not handle much sound, because sound files take up a lot of memory, and because the CDs could hold much more space data, the N64 was way behind as far as the sound design and engineering was concerned. So anyway, even without voices, they did it really kind of. It's charming the way that they presented that story. But anyway, let's talk about the multiplayer, because the multiplayer is what people remember about GoldenEye.
Right. And, it's kind of funny because, like, in modern times, there's been a lot of talk about multiplayer-only games. And as much as you're kind of pumping up the single-player experience, I think GoldenEye, if it had been just released as a multiplayer game, would have been just as big of a success. I mean, obviously they couldn't have done that given like the licensing deals in place, but I think GoldenEye is one of the few games that can claim that it would be just as big a success without its single player as it is with it.
I think you're crazy.
You really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at the time people would not have looked at a game that was multiplayer only and said, "Oh, that's worth my $70 or whatever games cost back then."
Well, I mean, it wouldn't have. It's kind of a moot point because no one would have funded development of a multiplayer only game.
I agree with you both on that point. Like,
yeah,
I think Daniel's right in saying at the time, but I think looking back, like I mentioned earlier, all I've ever heard about is how innovative and amazing the multiplayer was on a console. And that's what people remember that game for, from my little bit of experience.
But people needed the Trojan horse of the single player to get in there and even realize that the multiplayer was worthwhile.
Right. Yeah.
That's all.
Hey, I'm straight up single player fan, don't get me wrong. But I think this game, just from what I've heard, multiplayer is hugely important.
How do you think that multiplayer would hold up today, though, Jack? and like, how has it had much of a lasting impact since then? What do you think?
Honestly, I don't think so. I don't think it would hold up today. And I think we have a pretty great example of it not being able to hold up today with the re-release. I think a few years back, 2011, I might be wrong on that number.
Then. Yeah.
But there was a huge deal about this game being released. I remember everyone was talking about, oh man, the re-release of GoldenEye, this is going to be amazing. And it ended up being kind of a mediocre game. Yeah. And I think that if you released GoldenEye today without any adjustments, I think it would just be a mediocre experience for a lot of people. And, I think that's one of the problems we were kind of discussing at the beginning. That's one of the problems with that era of games. Like, if even an indie studio, if they made a game that looked like a PS1 or N64 game today, it would not make it onto Steam Greenlight. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mm. Yeah, the graphics did not age well.
The graphics didn't age well, and I think that control scheme is very hard to translate into other control schemes that we have today that feel much better.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes down to the point where I think I am, which is that GoldenEye is very much a product of its time. Like, I think it would be very hard to make like a GoldenEye HD re-release, which they already tried and failed to do. I think it'd be very hard to do that just because there aren't any controllers that are remotely like the N64's controller. You're not going to have the same tangible experience. You're not going to have the same visual experience. It's going to, for all intents and purposes, be a completely different game with some of the stuff that reminds you of the old one.
Right.
And I just don't know if that works in today's gaming climate.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and it's also sort of a relic of the time because it's a 4-player local multiplayer game, and it benefited from that really, really well. It benefited from 4 people sitting around on a couch, screen watching each other's screens, and like one person picking odd job and one trying all the people just
everyone
fighting over
getting upset.
So
fighting over what
it was
characters
Mario
you pick
Kart
and,
before Mario Kart.
No, I mean it came out after the first Mario Kart and came out just a year or two before Mario Kart 64. But it was the adult version of Mario Kart,
Okay. You could actually shoot other people.
Yeah. And
you could actually murder them for picking odd job.
Humans are weird. We like that stuff.
But it was so fast paced.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something from shooters at that time, is that they were very fast paced. You go back and play Unreal Tournament or Quake 3, they're so fast paced. And I love Half-Life, and it's one of my favorite games of all time, but compared to those games, that game is so slow paced.
Wait, what game?
Half-Life?
I've not heard of that game, Jack.
Well, we'll have to talk about it sometime.
I don't know. It sounds like it sucks.
It sounds like a bunch
Educate
of junk
yourself.
to me.
You both need to go sit in the corner.
But I madly respect this game. Like this I didn't know until I started. There was a lot of stuff I didn't know until I started looking it up. But it was only made by like 9 people, and 8 of them had never made a game before. Like,
yeah,
this was for all intents and purposes an indie game, and
it was a side project for Rare, basically.
Yeah, like a side project that no one expected to succeed or be really that great.
Yeah.
Even outside, like, obviously people inside the studio believed in it and had access to it, but even like a year before the game's launch, or a few months before, like, it showed off at several different shows, like the second year of E3, I think. And people saw it, but didn't think anything of it. Like, they saw early builds of the single player. They're just kind of like, oh, it's just another one of those. But I think once they got their hands on that multiplayer, they went bananas. Call back to our first episode, yo. What?
Donkey Kong, woo woo.
Woo woo.
But, and I think there's a certain aspect of other little things that it did too. And like, this is super tiny example, but I have a thing that I like to call the Metal Gear Solid 2 test. And that is, whenever there's like glass in games or stuff like that, I like to shoot at it and see if it breaks.
Yeah.
Because in Metal Gear Solid 2, there is, on the tanker level, there's like a full bar that has like like glasses that have ice cubes in them and stuff, and you can shoot them.
Bottles
and like, the ice will melt and like the bottle will shatter, and it's really great. And there's actually some of that in GoldenEye. Like, you can break glass. There's bullet holes in the walls. Like, those are small touches, but they really add to the sense of, I don't know, immediacy, urgency, reality.
Yeah.
I don't like using the word immersion, but it helps a little bit.
As the resident gun expert, if you shoot at a glass and hit it, it will break.
Thank you for explaining that to us.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
That's fascinating. Also, that's one of the other things that GoldenEye did that I had never seen a game do before, was it had very precise hit detection. Like, Turok 2 and Perfect Dark would go on to improve on it, in my opinion. But the hit detection in GoldenEye at the time was incredible. You could actually land headshots, and they made a difference. You could shoot a guy's hat off, or shoot I don't think you could shoot his gun out of his hands. That was Perfect Dark.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know these games very well.
That's not easy to do anyway, honestly.
Shoot a gun out of someone's hand? Yeah.
No, it's not.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Easy. Yeah. But you could do that, and that was I had never seen that in a shooter before. So, I mean, it doesn't play as well today for many reasons. The graphics have not aged well. The story presentation, while I thought it was cute at the time and it's charming, it does not hold up to age. And the controls that they were forced to implement just don't. They obviously don't work today. So I think you can go back and play some of those older PC shooters. Half-Life, Doom, Quake. You can go back and play those and still have a blast. GoldenEye, I'm not sure if you could, even playing multiplayer. Like, I've seen Let's Plays of people playing GoldenEye multiplayer, and they sound like they're having fun, but a lot of times they're just talking about how bad it is.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm at the point where I have somewhat recently gone back and played GoldenEye, and with other people, and it's just kind of, I'm not sure if I genuinely enjoyed the experience, or
it's like fun for the novelty.
Yeah, or if it was like kind of like so bad it's good kind of thing.
Right.
Like it's come all the way back around to being palatable, but for completely different reasons.
Right.
And I don't know. I do.
It's
what?
It's so unbalanced. That's all I wanted to just say.
Right, and I think that's probably where Perfect Dark has it beat, because it was designed with that multiplayer more in mind.
Yeah.
Because apparently, pretty much all of the credit for the multiplayer goes down to one guy on the development team who just, like, on a weekend, just sat down with all the single player code and designed multiplayer system. And
that's crazy.
That is so crazy.
So, this is not really related, but it kind of is. Today, Naughty Dog on Twitter posted a picture of their development team from 2002. And there were like 30 people in it. Mm-hmm. And then Sony Santa Monica from God of War 1 posted a development picture, like, of their entire team. And there were like maybe 33 people in it. And, Jack, you mentioned this game had what? Did you say 8 or 9 developed?
9.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what has this world gotten to where it takes so many developers to make one game now? Because you couldn't even remake the remake of this game with 9 developers.
I mean,
right?
No, definitely not.
No.
And I think that just is one of the things that plays into what a lot of developers are talking about these days, which are the ballooning costs of development for next-gen systems, and kind of why a lot of developers are more risk-averse these days. I think that's why we see a lot more risks taken in indie development, where the games are smaller in scope. No pun intended.
Yeah, I sincerely didn't mean to get us off on a different subject, but
oh no,
it's just amazing to me how the N64 era of games could be developed by so few people, and a couple generations later, it takes so many. And there's no guarantee of success. I mean, there was no guarantee of success back then either.
Right.
But, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was also a lot harder back then to get games made in the first place. Like, there wasn't a thriving indie community.
But that kind of speaks to the point. I mean, to develop a AAA game now, you need hundreds of people, if not thousands.
True, but compare the quality of that AAA game to the quality of GoldenEye. I'm not talking about gameplay-wise, but just like
comparing it is
presentation and
yeah.
Comparing it is fairly easy. Quantifying it is a little bit more difficult. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I think going forward it kind of becomes more. It's going to take more and more people to reach higher and higher levels of fidelity, unless like a lot more software overhauls are done on the tool end of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, you aren't going to hear stories about how the next BioShock game had one guy who sat down over a weekend and created a multiplayer mode. Right. It's just not going to happen.
Or like even, like I referenced, the next time Naughty Dog puts a picture up from 2008 even, it's going to have 300 people in it, the minimum, not 30.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't go a podcast without bringing this game up, but Rocket League, that was built by 12 people. More than GoldenEye.
Yeah.
And that's as simple as it gets.
It's a very focused game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're just kind of throwing out facts.
Sorry,
at this point.
like I said, I didn't mean to get us off on a tangent.
No, it's okay.
That whole concept amazes me. It really does.
It is pretty amazing because that one guy is probably the reason that GoldenEye is the best-selling N64 title.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
Like I kind of feel like I can cook 64 cheeseburgers in an hour, where other places it would take them, 5 or 6 people. And am I that good or are they that bad? I don't know.
Can you do that in a conventional kitchen? Because otherwise, if
if I had a conventional kitchen, I could do like double that.
Oh my goodness! Like, so Daniel,
I was just going to say I'm going to put that to the test when you're here in April.
I fully plan on having to cook for you because that's what I do. But at the same time, I expect you to, give me a bunch of money because you work at a bank. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, now that I think of it, you've never given me a bunch of money, and
yeah.
I mean, you are the only friend of mine that works at a bank.
See,
so.
I don't have access to the money.
My point is that even though I haven't played GoldenEye, and I'm not going to, I'll say right now, I'm not going to voice an opinion whether or not it's the best game, period. The fact that that development team could do what they do with so few people just literally amazes me. It does.
Yeah. Here's the thing about GoldenEye that I don't know that we've really run into yet. Maybe if we really got into a debate about Donkey Kong Country, we might have. But how do we judge a game if its place in gaming history is important, but it hasn't aged well enough to the point where we would recommend anybody actually go back and play it?
I think that's an easy question.
For
me, it's accessibility, gameplay. Is it fun? And is it worth playing? Like, if you could play GoldenEye 007 on any platform right now, and it's still fun, I don't really care how it looks, personally. But I don't know that
it's not only how it looks.
No, it's not only how it looks. And because that game, in my opinion, the multiplayer is what stands out to me because I've heard so many people talk about it, and now that's not the same. I don't know that I would count it as the best game, period. But again, I'm going to abstain from making that conclusion because I haven't personally spent any time with it. Not enough time, but any time with it. So,
what do you think, Jack?
I think it does fall on that weird line, because when I was coming into it without having read anything about it, I just kind of was leaning towards no. But then I read about it, and it's just so important for the things that it did that it can't be understated that the importance of a console FPS, like the first major one that really broke ground and was 3D, like, that's a big deal. Yeah. And especially when we live in an age where first-person shooters are the biggest genre. So I think it kind of falls under the category of if I were to read a history textbook on like important video games, in 30 years or something like that, I think it would be a crime if it didn't talk about GoldenEye at all.
Yeah.
And so I think I have to, like, it's just too important not to be one of the best games, period, even if I think it's aged poorly. It just has such a key... It played such a key role in the development of games as a whole that I'd have to say yes. Like...
I can respect that.
And I think it's one of those games where, maybe you wouldn't want to go back and play it for fun, but if you want to, like, go back and understand more about the roots of video games, you definitely should play GoldenEye.
Yeah. I think GoldenEye's influence is actually a bit larger than we give it credit for. I don't think Call of Duty would have been the same without GoldenEye. I think Medal of Honor was heavily influenced by GoldenEye, and Call of Duty came out of Medal of Honor and Modern Warfare. I mean, just you can draw a line through to that game, and the multiplayer, the impact of that game's multiplayer, they're not at all the same, but I imagine that a lot of the people at Treyarch and now at Respawn, I'm sure they played a lot of GoldenEye. And the same with Bungie and Halo. I'm sure that they played a lot of GoldenEye before they made Halo. It was just the game that you played for that year, and pretty much until Ocarina of Time came out. And it was just a huge game. It was too big at the time to ignore its impact on the industry. And I still think that it had some really interesting design decisions, and some really interesting things that it did. One of my favorite shooters of the last few years was Wolfenstein: The New Order, and I talked a lot when that game came out about how similar it is to GoldenEye and how it reminds me of GoldenEye.
I like the original Wolfenstein a lot.
The
one where you get to kill Hitler, yeah. Like the Doom type corridors.
Yeah. But the newer one, like, it's one of the things that we haven't mentioned on this show yet is that the combat, like, it could be stealthy. You could be stealthy, but when you had to be, you could just shoot your way out of the problem. And that's actually not easy to design and not easy to implement into a first-person shooter, for the AI to work both ways and for the combat to be competent both as a stealth game and also as a straight-up shooter.
Right.
And GoldenEye did that. And so, for me, definitely, GoldenEye is one of the best games, period. I know that it doesn't really hold up, but its influence and its impact on the industry is important.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
Sorry,
what you just said sounds a lot like what a lot of people said about Metal Gear Solid 4. Just saying.
But I love that it's a stealthy game that you can also play as a straight up shooter. Yeah. Whatever.
Note that he doesn't feel the same way about Metal Gear Solid 4, though that's kind of the same thing.
Whatever. Nope, it's not the same at all.
Whatever.
I don't remember any 2-hour cutscenes in GoldenEye.
Well, that's different. That's not what you said.
It came with a implied 2-hour cutscene that was called GoldenEye.
How about that movie? Can we talk about the movie?
Sure, go for it.
Haven't
How do we
seen
like
it.
that movie?
I
Do
hate
you guys
that
like
movie.
the movie?
I actually really don't like it.
Oh my god, really?
I'm
Yeah.
a Sean Connery, Roger Moore fan, to be honest.
Oh, speaking of Sean Connery and Roger Moore, apparently early builds of GoldenEye included all of the James Bonds up until Pierce Brosnan
Take
as
off your
playable
panties.
Oh, wow.
multiplayer characters that were then taken out.
Damn,
They
that would have
probably
been
couldn't
cool.
get their,
Yeah, early builds of the game had like screenshots and like gameplay of Sean Connery running around in a white tuxedo in
That's awesome.
in GoldenEye.
Well, they probably needed the license, a separate license. For
I
that.
will say I'm proud of at least Daniel and I for not making one Octopussy joke tonight.
I'm proud of you guys too.
Jeremy,
Daniel?
Jack,
Daniel.
I want to thank you both for joining me tonight on this adventure through GoldenEye and history of James Bond and N64 and first-person shooters.
And
It was
general
was
gun
fun.
knowledge, yeah?
Yeah, and general gun knowledge. Yeah, I know more about sniper scopes.
And
now.
I know more about GoldenEye 007. We all
Well,
win.
I'm glad. I hope that you do, and I hope that you out there listening to this episode know more about GoldenEye 007 now as well. And I hope that you have an appreciation for why that game is so important. Thank you for joining us and listening to episode 12 of the Best Games Period. If you like the show, please let us know and share your thoughts with us. You can follow us on Twitter at Best Games Period. You can listen to the show on SoundCloud, Libsyn, iTunes, and you can even watch video versions of every episode on YouTube. Come back next week for what should be a thrilling discussion, and I'm not saying that sarcastically, because this is a thrilling game, Super Mario Bros. 3. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Best Games Period.